We ready? All right. All right. This is Commissioner Robert Ganussi, and I'd like to call our Planning Commission meeting to order at 6:34 p.m. of June 23rd, 1925. Oh, 2025.
2025.
Excuse me. All right. I'm filling in for Andy until he gets here. I am the vice chair. So with that, we'll start with roll call. Staff first.
Town planner Garrett Scott.
Jeanette McVeigh, town clerk.
Assistant Town Planner Alan Seeliff.
We have anybody online from staff? Okay. Roll call of the commissioners, please, starting with Katie.
Katie Souls.
Brian Cirkvenek.
Peggy Smith.
And Bob Ganussi.
And online.
And online hi, Joy.
Hi.
All right. Next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda for this evening. Do I have a motion on that?
So moved. I'll second.
Seconded.
Okay, we got 2 seconds on that.
Mhm.
So we're almost there to approval. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Well, she's
No,
delayed.
isn't. Well, I
Joy is
thought we were gonna
delayed.
have our first real debate here. All right, thank you, Joy. All right, and the consent agenda, which will be the minutes from last month's meeting. Are there any comments on that? Did anyone have any issues or errors they want to bring to our attention? If not, I'll take a motion.
I wasn't there, so maybe you should. I don't think I was.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, here we go. I'm sorry, Joy, I have to wait a little longer. Okay, none opposed.
Is there a delay, Bob?
Yeah, there's just a slight delay, and so. All
Oh,
right, so we have no nays, so the consent agenda passes. Next, we'll go to open forum. Are there any issues with open forum? Hearing none, we will go to the discussion and possible action of our proposed draft code amendment on short-term rental regulations for accessory dwelling units. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Garrett to present.
Great. Thank you, Bob, and thank you, planning commissioners. So the item on the agenda this evening is a proposed code amendment to Chapter 19, dealing with some proposed regulations around short-term rentals specific for accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. So just as a reminder, these were the 7 prioritized strategies from our March 2025 workshop related to incentivizing and promoting affordable housing in Fraser. As it stands right now, we have completed or nearly completed priorities 1 and 2. The asterisks there are just meant to denote that our code amendment related to those items is advancing to the board next week on July 2nd for final approval. But substantially complete with that. And what we're talking about today is priority number 4. So the intention behind this code amendment, so as staff has discussed with the Planning Commission previously, ADUs are viewed as a tool to provide flexible and affordable housing options. They have the potential to increase housing affordability, both for the homeowner or property owner as a source of rental income, as well as for the tenant of that ADU, given that they're typically smaller and can have more affordable rents. ADUs create a wider range of housing options, can enable things like aging in place and multi-generational households, and also just better uses existing infrastructure in established residential neighborhoods. So Fraser has signaled clear support for ADUs earlier this year by permitting them as a use by right in all zone districts. So this is kind of meant to supplement that earlier change. So I wanted to note that per town code, an accessory dwelling unit cannot be separated by ownership from the principal dwelling unit. So renting out the accessory dwelling unit is really quite common, either as a long-term rental or sometimes as a short-term rental. So the intention behind this code amendment is to preserve the ability to earn, potential greater short-term rental income from the ADU while still providing a light regulation to ensure that ADUs themselves don't result in a proliferation of short-term rentals in Fraser. So this is the text of the proposed amendment to this specific section, Chapter 19-2-470. This is the section of our code that has our ADU requirements and regulations. There are 6 different items. This code amendment would add a 7th. And the key thing here is that underlined text, simply stating that at no time can the ADU and the principal dwelling unit that it's associated with that ADU simultaneously be licensed as short-term rentals. So fairly straightforward. The ADU can be a short-term rental, the principal dwelling unit can be, but not both at the same time. So I talked about a few of these things in the staff report, but currently there are no properties that would be immediately impacted by this. There are approximately 290 short-term rentals in Fraser. There are roughly 12 ADUs, although that's not a fully accurate inventory of them. But based on a comparison of those lists, there's only one ADU that is currently being used as a short-term rental. And on that property, the principal dwelling unit is not a short-term rental. So again, with this code amendment, there wouldn't be any impacts to existing properties, any existing short STR licenses. Once this code amendment is officially adopted, planning staff will create and maintain a comprehensive inventory of ADUs in Fraser, so that the clerk's office can use that in processing short-term rental license applications in order to, enforce this regulation. And something else that I wanted to note is that, in Fraser, short-term rentals are most prevalent in areas of town where ADUs are already prohibited. So just to speak to that a bit further, in Rendezvous and Grand Park, ADUs are either prohibited by the FPDPs that approve various, subdivisions and neighborhoods in those planned developments, or they're prohibited by HOA regulations, kind of on a neighborhood or subdivision basis. None of our existing ADUs are in Rendezvous and Grand Park, so I think it's a pretty fair prediction to say that any new ADUs moving forward would likely be outside those planned developments. And I also wanted to note that areas where ADUs are the most logical, where we're most likely going to see ADUs in the future, are areas where we have the lowest number of licensed short-term rentals, areas like here in Old Town Fraser, west of the railroad tracks. So ultimately, staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve this resolution 2025-0601. This would advance the code amendment to the Board of Trustees for their approval, likely August 6th. And then if approved by the board, then the ordinance would take effect in September. So happy to answer any questions or facilitate discussion from the commission.
Commissioners?
So Grand Park does allow him in the original filing, but I don't think anybody took advantage of that.
Sure, that's a fair note. I shouldn't paint Rendezvous and Grand Park with too broad a brush. I mean, there are some areas where they are allowed, but generally ADUs are not allowed. But yeah, that's a fair point.
Can't fit in the original neighborhood. The lots are too small.
Sure.
Yeah, so I'm on the fence on this one because I feel like ADUs is a good opportunity to get more long-term rentals. And these ADUs are going to be going in Old Town Fraser mostly.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of inviting short-term rentals into like the only real proper neighborhood that Fraser has without a million
Yeah,
second homeowners.
we already have a few, like the duplex at the end of the street, they're doing that addition. Well, but it's a duplex, it's just little. Um. I don't have a problem with it, cause I just don't. Some of the lots have room, some do not. And, I like that the language is really simple. It just says, you know, what, only one can be short-term rental. So having that definition, I think is really useful.
So Brian, are you thinking that if you just don't have any language and ignore it, that they're just gonna remain long-term?
No.
Well,
I
what if
think-
they
I
turn
think-
the home and the smaller unit into short-term rentals?
Right. I mean, some language needs to be in there for sure.
Yeah, so
But
this, as I see it, this prevents that from happening.
correct. But we could even go a step further if we wanted to and say ADUs can't be used for short-term rentals. I don't
think
know how
so.
I feel about that. I'm just saying devil's advocate a little bit.
I think it's a good source of income for folks, you know, if they've got like the little place right across the tracks
Mhm.
where they just put in that cool little short-term rental on the corner and remodel the house and
Yeah. With
I
the
mean, it's
sauna.
it's a cool combination.
Mhm.
And an advantage of it too is it's a STR and it's the permanent homeowner, or hopefully the homeowner's right next door. Keep an eye on it,
That's true.
you know, and kind of enforce their regs and all that.
And ADUs are typically smaller anyway, and so you're not gonna throw a rager.
Yeah,
You can't fit that many people overnight.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's a perfectly valid point. Maybe a couple other things. In looking at where in Fraser outside of Grand Park and Rendezvous, there are short-term rental units. Very few of them are here in the Old Town area. Again, which I would say is, you know, west of the railroad. And of the few that are here, they're kind of in slightly more isolated pockets, like off of Muse Drive or along Carriage Road. So not the main. There's a handful, I think, like on Fraser or maybe even Byers, but very, very few. And I think it's a fair point that are we potentially inviting, you know, in these more kind of traditional single family type residential areas, oh, if you build an ADU, then you can also get, you know, use that as a short-term rental. I think maybe that could be better handled by tighter short-term rental regulations or changes around that licensing process to say we don't want short-term rentals in these specific zone districts or geographic areas. But it is a fair point. I think really what's being proposed is kind of the lightest touch of a regulation, certainly. And there are certainly other tools that the Planning Commission and Board could explore down the road. So. Oh.
Try.
Joy, go ahead. We see your hand up.
I don't know if you're muted, Joy. We can't hear you.
Joy, are you there? She got disconnected?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
You're
Oh,
there.
thank you so much. I really appreciate the compromise that we came to in our last meeting about this, of there being a local full-time resident and an STR, one or the other. I think it addresses the housing issue that we have, and I like it a lot. And so I'm glad that it's coming to the Planning Commission to approve. So that's my Joy take.
Okay, thank you, Joy. Peggy,
Yeah.
do you have?
No, I think this seems like a good compromise. I think it's give a little, get a little. Everybody's hopefully happy with the end result.
Well, and, you know, it's worth pointing out again that literally on the same property there is going to be a full-time resident there.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
You know, so it's not just yeah.
That's true.
Right.
Or
That's-
could it have a long-term renter and a short-term?
Yeah,
That
Oh,
would be,
yeah.
yeah, could be like a caretaker's. account.
right. Essentially, the other unit, it could either be someone who lives there full time and owns a property, a long-term renter, or as Antoinette said, it could just be a vacant home. Obviously, we wouldn't want to see that, but ultimately, it cannot be a short-term rental, the second unit.
Yeah. You know, and another thought too is down the road, let's say if it was like a ADU for a aging parent or something, and they died. And then now they've got this little space, you know, and at that point, maybe they wanted to make some extra income or something to help pay for the dumpsters to empty out the house.
I'm thinking ahead.
I'm thinking about my house.
The Swedish death cleaning. book is a good
Just bring the dumpster in and hire some guys to throw everything away. Nobody else is gonna. But I do
Okay.
appreciate your thought about keeping Old Town Fraser, since you were just there for that block party.
Mhm.
You know, it was awesome, but anyway. I like it. I think it's really simple. It's just simple and straightforward. You can have an ADU, but one or the other
Mhm.
can be rented as an STR.
Actually, I think it's a good addition to our code. I have no issues with it, although I do have a question. Did you research the HOA documents for Rendezvous and Grand Park to
I-
see that you can't have an ADU? Because I could qualify for an ADU right now with my property. I have a lot with a detached garage and a little mother-in-law suite above it that has a kitchen, has a bathroom, and has a separate entrance and exit. So I'm just wondering, did we check that out to see that, no, I couldn't later come and say, I want to turn my detached garage apartment into an ADU?
That was the way it was
Or
originally
an
approved.
STR.
Yes,
Clark sold that.
right, right.
He got that whole plan from Aspen
Yeah,
and brought it in and convinced everybody this was going to be a great thing, and no one took him up on it. And he got
well,
brownie points for it. But
I would say that we have in the past had a long-term renter in our apartment over the garage. So we did use it as not an ADU short-term rental, but a long-term, we had a 6-month tenant that was in there at one time. So, I mean, it would be capable for someone who has the same model home that I bought in Clark's Phase 1 development to qualify for this as an ADU and turn it into a short-term rental. I'm not
This
gonna do
open,
that, but
Right.
this opens it up for Rendezvous and Grand Park just the same, to have the option to have an ADU and an STR. Is my understanding. Is that correct?
it's
It is.
prohibited by the HOA and Rendezvous. You'd never get it through.
yeah.
Yeah, again, I guess to answer Bob's original question, staff hasn't researched every single, planning area within Grand Park and Rendezvous and each of the, every single, HOA bylaws and restrictive covenants for every part of those developments. I just know on a case-by-case basis, planning staff has received some inquiries from property owners in Grand Park and Rendezvous can I build an ADU on my property? And generally, after doing the research, the answer is no. I recognize there's some areas, I think it's the Cousins Meadow neighborhood in Grand Park. That was the original
Right.
first phase of Grand Park. That is one that I believe allows ADUs from my recollection. But
And by the way, it's not necessarily every model that Clark built would qualify for that because many of them aren't detached garages and many of them don't have the kitchen.
sure,
He did it as an option. We decided to put it in ourselves. So it was something we did after we bought the home.
gotcha.
But the way he built the upstairs garage apartments, if you want to say it that way, was he built it with the option that someone could come in and put a kitchenette in and be able to live up there.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I don't think we might be talking about, and in the phase two, I don't think any of them would qualify for in his phase two in Cousins Meadow. So I think we're only talking about phase one and maybe at most 2 or 3 houses in there.
Sure.
So with that said, I'm perfectly happy with this and ready to take a motion if we're ready to pass this.
Okay.
Okay. I move to approve, what do we have? Do we have a motion?
I'll get it up on the
We
screen.
don't have a resolution 2025-0601 recommending approval of code amendment to regulate short-term rental licensing on properties with an ADU.
Thank you, Peggy. Any second?
Second.
Thank you, Joy. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Good going, Joy. You got it in or quick that time.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any opposed? Motion passes. All right. Good job, everyone. Let's see. We have open forum next. No, I'm sorry.
Other business?
We don't. Oh, here we go on the back. Other business. Do we have any other business to come before the planning commission tonight? Okay, seeing none.
I
Yes,
actually
sure.
have a little thing, Bob, please. I've been pondering something since our last PC meeting. I just want to explore for maybe 10 minutes, please. Some time together chatting further about the idea of having a parking garage, if possible, where the visitors center parking lot is. My reasoning for bringing it up, folks from Kansas and Texas coming from DIA on a passenger train, including families with little ones, children, they're going to be reluctant to utilize a public transit system if it's 20 below zero and they need to bring all the supplies they need to carry to and from the ski area. And after researching it, and I still do not have the land imprint measurement needed for that big sort of endeavor. It can have an entrance and exit off of Highway 40. Just a thought to ponder. We don't necessarily need to discuss it. I just think that embracing the passenger train to Fraser again, that maybe a ride and share vehicle strategy with a tech app, automatic bars for entrance and exit off the second lane off of Highway 40. Just want to plant that seed with you all because we already know that parking is an issue.
Where would you put this, Joy?
The visitor center parking lot, which I still have not researched out how much of a land imprint that would take for a multi-level entrance and exit off of Highway 40 off the second lane, next to utilizing the visitor center parking lot.
What are we talking about?
Like the HTA building?
Come again, please, Mayor Finnick?
The Headwaters Trail Alliance building?
Yes.
We're hoping that there will be a road that will extend from Safeway on across. So there wouldn't be enough room there, but I
Okay.
believe in our planning for Clayton's Court, there is a area that's been kind of identified for a potential parking structure, or at least parking above some commercial that may be out of town. But your point about having something available, like you say, the cars that are ready and waiting, we might be able to contract, if nothing else, with the hardware store if they don't expand. Because now they
Okay.
have all that parking space behind there. That might be a spot where that just a thought.
Well, and it's also on the right side of the highway too.
Correct.
As I was thinking through Joy's proposal, which I like her idea, it's just that visitor center parking lot is on the wrong side of 40 because the way she was describing it, people schlepping a lot of, skis and boots and baggage and everything, and they get off the train and there aren't many places for people to park to pick them up. But they're not going to walk 2 blocks in 20-degree weather to get to a parking structure on the wrong side of 40.
I think there are ride share options that we've discussed before. And it's just, it's cold here. More
yeah.
than people realize. And I really love the idea of everyone not driving vehicles and utilizing public transit. Just because we're optimizing the opportunities we have from passenger train travel, there are some things we can do forward thinking and planning that may help us not become like Steamboat, which is ridiculous to try and drive, and Keystone, or just something smarter that we can delve from those towns' experiences and what's we can predict from today what might happen. But a parking structure is important close to the train station.
If I can add a few things, I'm working with CDOT right now on the Highway 40 expansion through Fraser. We've had our first 2 calls, and one thing that they are proposing is dead ending basically Byers Ave at 40 and actually having the continuation of Clayton Avenue go across 40 so that it's a 4-way there to connect to Doc Susie.
I love that. Accessibility wise.
It's a huge benefit accessibility wise for sure. But then I
Yes.
see that, next to Goranson Station, we've got whatever 5 parking spaces there, but it would probably allow for parallel parking on that road as well if you're, if it's just a dead end for parking essentially. Then the other thing that CDOT proposed was the lot that we use for snow storage just south of Clayton Avenue on the west side of 40, turning that into a decent sized parking lot.
What would that do to the runoff for snow?
We'd have to sort it out. It might be that we're using it for parking instead of snow storage now, and we have to find another spot for snow storage. But another part of that proposal was actually doing an underpass for pedestrians and bikes.
Yes.
Right, kind of where that bend is to go back to 40, where the parking lot is right there. So it would run, they would probably kind of raise the road a little bit, but then Elk Creek goes through there, and then you could have a walking and biking path next to the creek that
That would
goes
take you right over to the visitor center.
Take you right to the-
HTA's.
by
Yeah.
and connect to the trails back there. And
That'd be wonderful.
on that call, Michael actually mentioned that they've been debating about putting a trail in that kind of follows Elk Creek to the west and connects to that Elk Creek Drive and maybe on from there to keep pedestrians and bikes off of County Road 72. So, yeah, a lot of really cool plans that could happen. I'm not going to guarantee anything by any stretch.
Well, none of us can.
What was that, Maggie?
Where's the snow storage in the lot that they want to turn into parking?
It's just this, yeah, right there.
It's next to the bank.
By the bank,
Mhm.
yeah, the south of the bank.
Hmm.
Oh,
And then Clayton's own, some of those, that house, isn't that the grandmother's
yeah,
house or
there's Connie's
something?
old place, like that.
Yeah, but the way the lot lines draw up, there's space along the creek that's, I don't know if it's town owned or public use.
And where's our train station again now?
It's over
Garrett.
here. Can you see
Okay.
that cursor?
Yeah, uh-huh.
It's right by
That's-
Fisher's.
Not
So-
very close to that
Well,
snow
and
storage lot though.
another thought too was in the future with St. Louis Crossing, with whichever building that is that's parallel closest to 40, there's going to be a large surface lot, but that would have the potential of being a multi-story parking lot, possibly with a drive-in, drive-out onto 40. And that would be fairly close to the platform. Because,
Yeah.
yeah, it would be a lot east of 'em. There's a access to the platform there, and they're moving everything to the north on the railroad by 100 feet or 100 yards.
I'm not sure.
You know, they're supposed to move the platform because it's too close to the crossing.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
so they're supposed to be.
That would make it even closer then.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So that's
Ooh,
potential for the future.
Mhm.
thank you all
If that
just
surface
for,
line, then we'll
yeah,
see.
just, I really appreciate you just uh, thinking about that possibility, because we do know that parking is an issue. And I do think that if we have parking, our businesses will thrive more. People who are from Texas and Kansas, I'm not singling them out or anything, but I mean, it's cold, and we want families and it to be accessible for everyone. And so a ride share multi-level parking garage may be a good solution.
Well, I think it's a good idea that you brought up, and should we put that on an agenda as an agenda item for a future meeting to give staff maybe a little time to noodle around on the idea, come back to us with some thoughts on a
So
proposed way forward?
probably after, because the comp plan gets finalized this summer. And with that, that should include that options or those areas.
Yeah.
So
So I
I'd
think
say after the comp plan.
Yeah, and I think the conversation was great, kind of identifying there are definitely a few different potential locations that a structured parking garage could be built. And I think some of what the comp plan will also speak to is, okay, how could we actually go and build it? What funding and financing mechanisms are out there? Some of the ones that are just top of mind in my head are the DDA, the Downtown Development Authority, the tax increment or TIF money that comes in from property tax increases within the district that could be utilized to issue bonds that then build a parking garage and they get paid down by property taxes over time. That could be a strategy for those DDA revenues, but there's certainly plenty of other things, plenty of other improvements that that funding could go towards. I know another thing that staff has discussed, again, just at a very high level without much, data or numbers to back it up, is a fee in lieu of parking structure, where as development occurs on Clayton Court, some sites could opt to not build parking spaces on site and instead pay a fee for every space. That money then goes towards building the parking garage. And certainly there are likely other implementation mechanisms out there. But again, those would be discussed in the comprehensive plan and certainly explored in greater detail. But staff can do some further research and bring this back, later this year, kind of a parking garage implementation discussion, if the planning commission would like.
It would definitely need to be a pay for use endeavor, and it's huge. And there are grant monies out there for I realize how out there this project would be expense wise. There are, and it's time consuming to get those grant monies, but just finding a solution for the parking issue that we know already exists is thank you for talking about it.
Yeah, of course.
Of course, and thank you for bringing the idea to us. Any other discussion on that? If not, I think we're now looking at future agenda items. Do we have any that we want to put on our next few agendas, or we know what we want to talk about?
We will likely have a discussion around some comprehensive plan items in July. So this is kind of a timely item to talk about. And outside of that, potentially other code amendment items, staff is aware of a state law around non-functional grass turf and prohibiting that in new developments. And staff's understanding is that we have to implement that before the end of this calendar year. So if,
Hey, Joy, can you mute yourself? There's some weird background.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah, that's okay. It's by whoop, whoop, oh, whoop, whoop. Thank you.
I was writing. What will you elaborate on that, please, Garrett? And I'll mute myself now.
sure,
Grass
yeah,
turf.
thank you, Joy. Yeah, my understanding is non-functional turf essentially just means grass turfs, grass lawns.
Okay.
And there is a state law that prohibits that in new development. Staff has only done some preliminary research into this. That may be brought forward in July, but it's something that we'll need to bring this calendar year.
I'm
Good
sorry.
Yeah.
I wasn't listening close enough, I guess. Are we saying that we're not allowing natural grass turf anymore?
In
It has to be-
non-functioning areas, yeah, there doesn't serve a purpose
That doesn't.
around a
okay.
home, like
So if-
somebody's front yard. Or, but if it's just a big old expanse, I'm guessing, or, maybe at a grocery store or something that's just for look. Makes sense
What
to me.
has brought this to your periphery?
So this was a law passed by the state legislature in 2024, and it has a deadline for municipalities to enact this. I do believe it exempts single-family residential and existing properties. Staff will do further research, but it is something that we need to bring forward. There are certainly questions around, again, not to get too into it right now, but Grand Park and Rendezvous have certain irrigation water rights related to grass lawns, essentially. So there's questions about how this interplays with this, but again, it's something that's going to come to the planning commission and the board this year because it would affect our landscaping regulations in our land development code.
Right.
So
Interesting.
So Rendezvous does not permit Kentucky bluegrass anywhere. And
Good.
if you have irrigation, it's a drip system. And there's no cut grass.
mhm.
It's all wild meadow mix.
Good. So
Yeah.
down initial rendezvous.
It's a water resource issue,
Yes,
is
absolutely.
what I'm gathering.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But it wouldn't stop a single family homeowner outside of an HOA from having. Oh,
They
I-
could, because I think this is statewide, because I think they're trying to get
But it says non-functional space.
what's functional.
That's what we'll find out.
Yeah. I have just the summary of the bill pulled up, and it says that it applies to commercial, institutional, industrial property, or common interest community property.
Yeah.
So like an apartment or multifamily residential property.
A golf course or a park or something that people could use, not just you have it at your front
But
yard.
not
Right.
residential.
It appears to not apply to single family residential, but again, staff will do further research on this. So,
Awesome.
Thank you for keeping your hand on the pulse of that. It's important.
Okay, any other future agenda items to discuss?
mhm.
Hearing none.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All right, hold on a minute.
You
You guys are ready to get out of here, I can tell. Okay, we have a motion and a second to adjourn, but before I call for a vote, I'd like to remind everyone that Wednesday, July 23rd of this year is our next planning commission meeting. And with that, I'll call the meeting adjourned at
7:15.
7:15 p.m.
Thank you.
Early. Thank you
done.
all.